Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Hamza Foy with the 502 podcast. Before today's episode begins, I have a couple of announcements to share with the Louisville Muslim community. To start, there is a request for du'as for Sister Ariane Noodles Kenyon, who's having brain surgery. They request that du'as are made for a successful surgery and a successful recovery. Guiding Light Islamic Center Outreach will have a dawah booth at the Kentucky State Fair that runs from August 19th to 29th. If you are interested in answering questions that people may have about the Islamic faith or sharing resources, the sign-up link will be in the description of this video. If anyone knows of a Muslim residing in Louisville who's had a cherished experience with the late boxer Muhammad Ali, please get in touch with me. Kentucky Educational Television is planning a documentary about the life of Muhammad Ali. The Somali community of Louisville is having a back-to-school supplies drive on Sunday, August 15th at 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. hosted at the International Mall, 737 South 8th Street. They are giving away free school supplies to students returning this school year. MCC will be hosting the American Red Cross for a blood drive on Sunday, August 29th, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. You must make an appointment at redcrossblood.org. The links will be in the description of this video. If you have any daughters or sons, kindergarten age and up, Guiding Light Islamic Center will be reopening their weekend school, teaching Fusha Arabic and Islamic studies. The sign-up links will be in the description of this video. Without further ado, this episode of Reading Between the Lines. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Hamza Foy Mishkat Suleiman with this episode of Reading Between the Lines. Got an interesting book that we're going to be dissecting. It is called What Tech Calls Thinking, an inquiry into the intellectual bedrock of Silicon Valley by author Adrian Daub. To start, before we jump into the meat of the book, the meat and potatoes, I'm going to make this clear. This book is probably the densest read, in terms of like level of vocabulary, the prose of the book. This has been the densest read. So I do want to warn those who want to try to pick up this book. It's a challenging read. Don't feel like, it is a small book in terms of page number, but it may take time to get through to kind of understand the thesis of the author. But all right, we're gonna jump in and try to at least take on 2 or 3 of the pieces of his thesis. I found the book interesting because you don't see a lot of books talking about the thought process of a specific industry, in this case the tech industry. And for a lot of lay people, it tends to go under the radar, the thought processes, the long-term goals and strategies of people in various parts of society, politics, in this case, the tech industry. And I feel that despite the dense read, he does a good job talking about certain kind of overarching like thought processes and themes that these tech leaders tend to operate within. I know if you wanted to talk about the whole concept of like failure being like this major theme among like tech industries. What did you kind of get from the book?
Well, I just want to preface before we start even into the actual content of the book, because I don't want readers to be, dissuaded from picking it up. It's not a dense read in terms of it's really hard to understand the concepts. It's only so dense because he's very flowery in his language. So Adrian Daub, I don't know if someday you might come across this podcast. Awesome ideas, man. Just, not everything needs a thesaurus. I think is what happened in this book. But one of the major themes that this author kind of called out as saying that's a big part of the tech industry in general is this concept of fail better. And so your every failure is a success in and of itself almost, which is, it's fine. It's a little cutesy. Eventually, though, you do have to succeed. So the whole concept, I think, of fail better only works in hindsight when you've succeeded. So, it's almost as if failure is the goal because it's been embedded into the brains of all these people who start up tech companies that failure is the first thing you're going to do, and failure somehow teaches you more than success, which in some cases can be true, but I mean, eventually you do have to succeed. So
I think, it's interesting, like, because, I brought this up right before we started the recording. It's easy for, tech giants to like encourage people to fail better. It's easy when you come from, say a wealthy family. And okay, if you fail, then in that case, okay, you have your family to, kind of provide that safety net. Okay, you tell, middle class or working class people that, I'm sorry, there's a lot, like, middle class and working class people can't really fool themselves with this kind of illusion. But that's the thing, is that these tech
it's
giants...
an expensive illusion,
Exactly.
though. That's the thing. I mean, one of the ending points, we're kind of jumping around the book a little bit. It's not a chronological book by any means. It's based around six key themes, and it's a small enough book. It's been divided up into essentially 6 chapters, but I noted, like, towards the end, as we recently saw, Jeff Bezos and who was the other guy?
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson. I'm not sure what his company is, but both of those people recently went to the edge of space because they could. They went to the edge of space because they could, and they said, at least Jeff Bezos said, thanks to all of his employees and customers, it would never have happened without you. And so, it's like somebody had to do it. Somebody has to be the richest person in the world. Somebody has to go to the edge of space just because, for no other reason. And so Jeff Bezos did. And so when you are wealthy and you've been born into wealth and you continue to accumulate wealth, exponentially, then you can fail as many times as you want. And more importantly, you can make your success bigger than a person who doesn't have that kind of background. So it's a little incongruous.
I mean, and what's interesting is this author almost feel like, because he's a bit sardonic in his writing. He kind of pulls his punches with...
He's sarcastic, but again, it's like so flowery and in-depth that it almost... so if anybody's reading this, they're going to be like, what? What do you... Oh, he didn't mean that.
But it seems like a number of the big ideas that, like, the tech industry has adopted is in a way to, like, excuse, like, some of the apps that they've produced, some of the, he uses the word like disruption that they've caused. So I think, like, in this book, he was talking about how, you have like an app like Lyft, right? So you had, prior to Lyft if you wanted to travel, in a city or countryside that you don't reside in, you don't have access to your car, okay. Usually it was cabs.
Taxis,
the taxi industry. And then they just kind of bulldozed through that with Lyft. There was no prior thinking of what will be repercussions. It's almost like, okay, they built something like Lyft. Then they kind of look back, like you said, in hindsight, and like, okay, we need to kind of explain what we did. And so they come up with, these ideas that, it doesn't do a good job explaining why they did what they did. For example, the development of Lyft. It's like, oh, okay, let's create this buzzword, disruption, and kind of make it praiseworthy to kind of, in my opinion, to kind of, paper over the damage that they've caused.
I agree with that in general. I don't know that Lyft and Uber were the best example, just because, someone who drives a taxi can now drive for Lyft or Uber and probably make a little bit more money anyway.
Yeah.
And now it's more convenient to get a Lyft anywhere in the world, really. Now it's global. But, with other, and I think when we think of tech, what are the first companies that come to mind? For some people, it might be Apple or Microsoft. For other people, it might be Facebook, Google, Twitter, right? So where are we going? Are we calling tech? Has social media taken over what is tech? And I don't know. I personally don't think of Lyft and Uber as social media apps. They are certainly tech apps.
Yeah.
But I think a better example of what you might be, talking about, making that point of like the disruption. I think Twitter is just a stellar example.
Twitter, Facebook.
Well, Twitter mostly because of their character limit. I think it's so interesting because, if you think about it, all of the social media apps really do the same thing. You have something that happens, you want to post about it, you want to promote something, so you post. Instagram, the first thing you see are pictures, and then maybe if you're present enough, you might read the caption. Facebook is the opposite. You can put an entire article on Facebook and pictures if you so wanted. Twitter is interesting because it's limited its character count to 140 characters, including spaces, punctuation, everything and anything. Only 140. And so, we can get into this a little bit, but you're talking about the disruption. We're used to like this instantaneous snippet, in 140 characters or less. Make the point that you want to make. Yeah. And, you and I sitting here doing this podcast, we've already failed that. We're at 11 minutes right now. But what does that do long term, Because I don't even know how long Twitter's been operating.
The reason why, I will preface by saying my experience with Twitter is very limited. I don't, so whether it's newscasters, politicians, like Muslim scholars, scientists, I don't follow any of them on Twitter. I know a number of them use it. I attack Facebook and Instagram. And once again, I feel like I can lump Twitter in this. I have an issue with Facebook and Instagram. Because Facebook, for the reason that you open the ability to share information, to paint narratives, to give your opinion. You've opened that to the masses. My problem is, and I think, we've talked about this time and time again, for example, the COVID-19.
This is what we do for fun. We discuss things, just so you all know. This is the Suleiman Foy household. Mashallah, I'm not. It's wonderful.
But COVID-19. Now every Tom, Dick, and Harry gets to put their input in, gets to influence people's opinions. Now, Instagram will be different from Twitter and Facebook, my critique of Instagram, because Instagram has more to do with people's psychological needs. There needs to be like affirmed, accepted. So okay, you have like people on Instagram, at least people that are good with that app, they know how to Photoshop, airbrush, and I'm using these terms generally,
Facetune.
Airbrush their pictures, because once again, it's like a dopamine hit. It's like, oh, like, oh, this person loves my pictures,
Yeah.
Facebook, I won't attribute that issue so much. Facebook, it has more to do. My critique has more to do with, okay, every Tom, Dick, and Harry gets to comment on things that perhaps they're not experts on. Perhaps they don't have, like, they're not in a position where they have a valid opinion. But that's the thing, is you've opened that floor for discourse to anyone and everyone now. And for me, I find that a little problematic.
That's more Twitter, though. That's
True,
more, because I have all three. I have a Facebook, an Instagram, a Twitter. And Facebook is definitely people that Facebook and Instagram are both people that I have at least met and spoken to. Maybe not in recent years, but I know them. Like, I can tell you, oh, I know this person from this Twitter. It's kind of a free-for-all.
Yeah, true.
Anybody who, and it's not, here's the thing that really irks me about how people use Twitter, because again, I'm going to go back to the character limit. It's only 140 characters. So you know what people do on Twitter?
What?
They write out an entire, like, novel, take a screenshot of it, and post it as a picture on Twitter. And it's like, but the reason is because it's such instantaneous engagement on Twitter for words. Where Instagram is for pictures, Twitter is now becoming like the instant thing for words. So you get around the character count, but it's still so instantaneous because someone can retweet what you said, just like hit a button and circulate it even more. It's like quicker than sharing on Facebook. So,
and that's the thing, is like going back to this whole theme of disruption. Once again, these developers, these companies, okay, they build out the apps, roll them out to the public, and then once again, in hindsight, okay, how do we make this look good for ourselves? Oh, disruption. Make that like a celebrated ideal. And it's like, okay, well, you guys are celebrating this, but not wanting to face the consequences that are caused by the apps that you've put out. So like, because he talked a little bit about this, Facebook, okay, you make it to where, okay, anybody and everybody can have an account. Anybody and everybody can build a following. Okay, Facebook, for example, doesn't want to face the fact that, for example, you have far-right, Nazi elements using your app as kind of a bully pulpit. And then, you get into the problem, okay, you've opened Pandora's box. Now people are complaining about who you're handpicking to stick back in that box. So for example, okay, you've got the conflict in Palestine. Facebook goes after people who are anti-Zionist.
Right.
That, and that's the thing, is like what he's saying is there's no deep thinking about what are the effects of this app that I design. Instead, it's let's design it, let's make it, as marketable, because you've got all this competition, and then okay, you roll it out. Now you look behind yourself and you're like, oh, this is disruption. This should be celebrated. And it's like, okay, you guys are totally ignoring all the consequences that are rendered by some of this tech. Not all, but some.
I agree with that to an extent. And it works both ways, right? So we're talking about the creators of these apps. And the impacts that they've caused, mainly that people's attention spans are non-existent now. That's like my biggest thing is, when you're getting things in 140 characters, anything longer than that, you're not going to want to look at it. And when you're swiping through pictures, if it's not something immediately engaging and super colorful or totally out of the box, some type of a really creative video, you're not gonna want to engage in it. But I think it I don't know, I don't always hold the creators responsible, because I mean they created a thing, and they wanted money, and they got their money. And beyond that, I don't know. I guess I don't have it in my nature to expect anything else, because I mean, if you think about the person who invented insulin, and I cannot remember his name, he sold the patent for that for $1, because he wanted every person who was diabetic to be able to have this life-saving treatment. And what has Big Pharma done with insulin? Made it to where you could have the best insurance in the world, and you still will probably struggle to get yourself some insulin, to where people are rationing insulin. Which is, I mean, they'll die without it. So it goes both ways. I don't always hold the people who made these apps responsible for how people have chosen to use them. Because we have this technology now to communicate instantaneously, and a lot of it is being used for good, but a lot of it is being misused. And unfortunately, and I think this might have been something that was discovered in hindsight when some of these apps were starting out. And now I think they should be held more responsible, because another point that this author makes, Adrian Daub, in his in this book, is that these apps are made for engagement. So it doesn't matter what the content is, you want people to engage. And we were just talking about this earlier. What's the best way to get even more engagement on these apps? Trolls. All right. So we can get into that, because I know you had some really good points you wanted to bring up about that. But
yeah, he dived into this, and I'm not gonna lie, I know a number of people, high school, college. I knew a number of people who engaged in that kind of behavior. Now, I'm not talking about the person who goes on like a YouTube video and posts just like something just erratic. I don't mean that. But they exhibit this kind of behavior, and I think Daub, and I've not read much about this kind of behavior, and we'll explain trolling in a minute. Daub probably did a pretty good job explaining like the psychology behind it. So basically, trolling is like it's the act of like intentionally and typically repeatedly making comments in order to elicit negative reactions from other people. And these are not kind comments. These aren't like, "Oh my God, you look wonderful today." No, it's negative comments. We kind of say it's like, I don't know, idiomatically like poking the bear. Like you're purposely doing that to get a reaction. So like, okay, a scenario. People from both sides of like the political aisle, whether you're on the right or left, you have this deep-seated, like polarized hatred for the other side. So okay, you're somebody on the right, you despise people on the left. You're on the left, you despise people on the right. People who do this kind of trolling behavior, they troll because they already have this preconceived notion that the people on the other aisle disappoint them so deeply. And so for them, trolling is a way to reaffirm, oh, this is why I hate. Okay, if you're on the right, this is why I hate people on the left. You post provocative comments. You express, just inane opinions to elicit what is going to be like
an explosive response in
explosive reaction in return. He does a pretty good job at actually laying that out. And I'm not gonna lie, I know people from like different parts of like the political spectrum. I know, born again Muslims who are disappointed that everybody else isn't as Muslim as them. So what do? They troll. It's like,
I've never heard the term born again Muslim.
People are not as Muslim as me, or not as practicing. And it's like, I've always felt it was repugnant. There are going to be people different from me They're going to be people on different levels than me, whether it's, maybe the career I'm in, or like history knowledge, or my dean, or whatever. But I'm not going to sit there and be disappointed in them. But that's the thing, is like he points that out. It's them, they have such a deep-seated disappointment that there's people opposite of them. And so they troll to like reaffirm, oh, they're still there. Oh, they're still there. And it's insane because the stuff, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, it enables that. Because once again, it's based on engagement. Mm-hmm. Just like I can just sit there. Yeah. Wee hours of the morning. Oh, it's...
And it's a really vicious feedback loop because, these platforms are designed to engage the trolls and to enable the trolls because that's how they drive up engagement from everybody else who's not trying to troll. Maybe they're just trying to get, their opinion out there. Yeah. But then social media like this has really, I truly believe it has stunted us in terms of our social skills, our communication skills, because you and I, we're millennials, so we've grown up with and without the internet. I remember the days of dial-up, and I remember the days of if my mom's on the phone, I can't be on the computer, and I remember the days of the phones with the really long antennas and the flip phones and the Nokias that nobody can destroy. We're in the best of both world situation. So we, I think, are better equipped to deal with breaking this feedback loop that I'm going to elaborate on. But there's this whole generation that has been brought up in the instantaneous Wi-Fi internet age. Because, the internet's been around for decades. Yeah. But this is internet in everybody's home. Mm-hmm. If you look at in Africa, and I hate to say it because this is not a joke, but there might be some people who don't have enough food. But everybody has a phone with internet. Mm-hmm. And so now there's like this whole generation that's been brought up on entirely social media, and there are babies who get put in front of a screen for the whole day, and that's their engagement. That's like how they're going to grow up. And so now there is no way for them to break that feedback loop because they're getting even less and less personal interaction with people. Because, there are some things that people say online, and you just know they would never say that to the same person in person to their face. Like, you just know it. Yeah. And so, if you've not been raised in the environment where you realize, oh crap, I could, interact with a person face to face, that if I say this to, they're going to put me through the wall, You
said it out.
Maybe they wouldn't say things like that, or even they would word it differently. Yeah. So, instead of starting their barrage with a bunch of expletives, they'll say, hey, in my humble opinion, They would
display tact.
Tact, exactly. That's what's lacking, and it will continue to be lacking, when we have this technology. And it's not just social media. It's a lot of like different technology that takes us out of the way of actual human contact. Yeah. Even something as simple as like a washing machine, if you think about it, like what did people used to do? They used to like go out to like a laundromat and do their laundry. Yeah. And now almost everybody has a washing machine. So, you don't have to say howdy do to the nice lady at the washing machine that's counting out quarters. Yeah, it's little drops. It's little drops in the ocean that turn into like these giant ripple effects, which is so cliche, but it's nonetheless true.
Two things. Go back to like what you said about like, people not having tact in their conversation. Coming from like Eastern Kentucky, that's one of the things I was actually thankful for, that hey, I just so happened made it. I was born and came from like a rural background, because you get that. Mm-hmm. You get that tact. Yeah. Because it's like, okay, you speak rudely enough to somebody, they're going to, depending on how rude it was, okay, either they'll just reply to you in kind, with as much sharpness on their tongue, Or, okay, there might be physical repercussions to set you back in line and teach you that's not how you talk to nobody.
Mm-hmm.
You know. But anyways, to add on further, because, you know, he talks about the fact that, you know, the social media apps, you know, they're created for engagement. I realized this. I wish I had realized this earlier. I realized this probably like the end of high school, beginning of college. Unfortunately, I was one of those people prior where I would get into the arguments and stuff on the internet.
Mm.
I would get into the debates.
Yeah.
And trust me, I mean, you know, I could sell it so many ways to myself. I could fool myself into, Hamza, you're doing the right thing. You know, but at the end of the day, that internet, the social media apps, they don't really allow for cognitive dissonance. And that's what you need when you're trying to change people's minds, when you're trying to influence them or persuade them, okay, maybe I should reconsider. You know, for example, maybe I should reconsider my position on what they're doing at the border. You don't solve that by getting into, you know, arguments on the internet. I've getting into college, I realized that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, okay, you get into these back and forth engagements. Nobody's observing any modicum of like intellectual honesty.
Mm-hmm.
B, you know, especially on the internet, you know, you've got stuff like Wikipedia. Once again, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can add and edit a Wikipedia article. Yes, they have people that comb through, but that's not perfect.
Yeah.
Any Tom, Dick, and Harry can make a website. I can make a website in 5 minutes. I can push an app, bam, it's on the internet.
Message Hamza Foy for any websites you might want made. Shameless plug.
So it's like, okay, you're arguing on the internet. You don't even know where the other party is getting their information from, whether that information is verified,
mm-hmm.
whether that information is academic.
Yeah.
You know. So once again, trying to argue on the internet, it was, you know, was it what's that phrase, like a futility. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. It was basically like a ruse of futility,
It's
because
an
like
exercise in futility.
There you go, exercise in futility. Thank you. You know, you're sitting there, you're getting your blood pressure's just rising, your face is getting red. Oh my God, why isn't he changing his mind?
Nobody can see this. Nobody can see this behind the scene.
And that's the thing.
The screen.
That's not where you change anybody's mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And I think he touches on this, the author. Mm-hmm. He touches on this as well. He keeps referencing this philosopher whose name is Marshall McLuhan, who stated that irrelevant of content, the medium or the media is the message, right? So the way that Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, the way that they work, the way that they show you content, the app itself is the message that you're sending, more so than, so, you know, you're sitting there and trying to talk some sense into, you know, whoever it is that you're railing at.
Yeah.
And they're not getting it because, one, you're doing this over Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whichever of your preferred, you know, I say you in general, but whichever of the preferred methods. And, you know, it's like nobody cares to be receiving that information through this medium, because the medium is the message. Well, if it's trivial enough to be spoken over Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or any other social media app, then the content doesn't matter. It's trivial altogether.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really excellent point that he made. And I think it applies to, like, television media as well. You know, if you think about it, Fox News is the message. Click that off in a second. You know, MSNBC is the message.
Yeah.
You know, click that off. I don't want to hear their message, because if the medium is the message, I don't want that message, so I'm just not even going to listen to the content.
Yeah. Yeah,
So that's
so
a really
true.
interesting point.
I know I'm springing this on you.
Oh, no.
What would you propose to be not overall solutions, not solutions that will work 100%, but what are some ways that people can kind of take a step back from the social media usage and the tech usage, the irresponsible tech usage? Once again, you know, I think you and I are both on the same page. Not all tech is bad. But once again, a number of the tech media can be used irresponsibly, or it can have negative consequences. What are some ways that you think maybe we can kind of step back?
It's really simple. And I've been doing this because like you mentioned, for me it was after college, because after college was when the previous presidency happened for me. So that's when I went off the rails, because I was just kind of looking at the country around me and thinking, how could anybody support this? So I went off the rails too, and I have since also realized just how futile that is. It's really simple. At this stage, we can't expect anybody to just close all their social media accounts and go away. So what I would recommend is post on social media when something positive happens, like genuinely positive, not something that you have to Photoshop and crop and, you have to say just the right words to portray it in a certain light. When something genuinely positive happens, post. And when something very negative has happened in your life, or even like the most minor inconvenience, sometimes, we're just having that kind of day, and the fact that I can't get the lid off of the peanut butter jar makes me want to break the microwave. That has happened to me before. So my habit used to be to go on Facebook and cuss out the peanut butter jar, because how dare it not open for me? And so when that happens, go to your favorite person and vent. And when something genuinely good happens in your life, post that. Because it is so much easier to post about the negativity. Because even though you might not realize it on a conscious level, when you post something negative on social media, consciously you're not thinking about how many people might read this. You're not thinking about, oh, this could reach like 1 million people. Subconsciously, though, your brain knows there's like a whole world out there that this could reach. So, subconsciously, your brain is thinking more people will see this, and more people will selfishly share in my misery. So I would say, and it's really simple, and I've gotten to the point where, and I'm not saying tons of positive things have happened, but since I've gotten in the habit of just posting the positive things, sometimes I even forget to do that. Because it's like, I had this experience. It was a wonderful experience. It's there in my memories. I keep it in my private photos or whatever. And that's where it lives, So I don't feel the need to post it anymore. So, there's never any cold turkey. You can't quit social media cold turkey. But if there's one thing that you'd want to change about your social media habits, is post when something really positive happens. And just let out your joy about it. Don't phrase it perfectly. Don't make it marketable. Don't make it pretty. Just be human and post the humanity and move on.
All right, I have a couple of suggestions. I'll try to move them through them quickly. Immediate suggestions, and I think I showed you this a couple of days ago. Right off the bat, most phones, Android and iPhone, have the option of you setting the display to grayscale. Now, I know that's kind of like an arcane suggestion. I'm sure some people are like, Hamza, why? Studies have shown that like these apps, they utilize the fact that we're attracted to like bright, diverse colors.
This works really well if you're prone to like some serious binge online shopping.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Set your phone to grayscale. Put all of your apps in a folder where it's not immediately like there right when you turn it on. Because that's the thing is, you know, the developers of these apps, especially the ones that have been successful and or mass used, they're not dumb people. They know how to design their apps in such a way that it's like it's almost like where it becomes second nature. It's like I turn my phone on, Facebook.
It's habit.
Turn my Facebook on, WhatsApp. You know, turn your phone on to grayscale, hide it in the folder. Facebook, I don't know how well this would work on Twitter. This would work on Instagram and Facebook though. Cut down the number of pages you follow. Now I know I'm using like Facebook parlance, but I mean Instagram has pages too, I think.
Twitter has accounts that you follow too.
Yeah. Trim down the number of accounts that you're following. Because the thing is I have my Facebook, and I'm not saying this like as a pat on my back, but I have my Facebook down to where I only have maybe a dozen pages that I followed. And these are like Muslim scholars and, you know, local news and stuff, not like Wave 3, but like, you know, like local government news and that sort of thing. Trim all that down, because you it's not reasonable for a person to swim through content and content and content. You overload yourself. The best of us overload ourselves. I'll be the first to admit, I used to have like all these pages followed and I'm reading every little thing. And it's like, that's just not reasonable, because you burn yourself out. You know, my third suggestion is you have to kind of, in this one, you have to really know yourself to make sense of this third suggestion. If you're somebody who's like prone to like jealousy, like Hesed, okay, you should not be exposing yourself to everybody's picture perfect Photoshop, you know, filtered whatever imagery, because once again, and this applies more to Instagram than like Facebook and Twitter, but like once again, that just eats away at you. I hate to say it.
It does.
And there's some people. There's some people this will be a problem that they're going to have to really address with themselves. Some people, you know, they're the type of people, they see something nice, they're genuinely like, oh, mashallah, alhamdulillah, okay, scroll past. But there are some people, it's going to be a problem. So once again, you know thyself. If you're somebody that's prone to fall into that, look, man, don't expose yourself to all of that. Other suggestions.
I have 2 more points.
Go ahead.
So the first point, and this applies mostly to Instagram, and I'm speaking, well, you know, it applies to both sexes. It applies to men and to women.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, men have certain expectations too. You know, they have a certain expectation of you have to look a certain way, and you know, your hair must be very closely cropped, and you have to have a military look about you, and you know, all of that is fake. I really just, because I used to feel bad about it too. You know, like I would try all kinds of crazy skin treatments and acids and serums and hair growing things, and it's like, people have extensions in their hair, men and women. People have eyelashes on, fake lashes. But most of all, people have a filter already built into whatever camera that they're using to take a picture or to take a video. There is a filter. It doesn't matter. There is a filter that changes the contours of the face, that smooths out every line. You know, I can go and you know, get a basic camera and I can make a 60-year-old woman look like she's 30 very realistically. So the first thing is the terrible thing that social media has done has just made completely unrealistic expectations, and it's become so commonplace that we no longer realize that these things are just fake. We continually try to achieve them. You know, even for men, like when you see men with the extremely ripped bodies, you know how they achieve that? By not drinking water and dehydrating themselves so that their skin drapes over every inch of their muscles. Yeah. Please tell me how that's healthy. Yeah. It's not. It's not healthy. Yeah. So same thing for women, these unrealistic beauty standards, it's not healthy. Yeah. So that was my first point. Sorry, it was kind of long. No, you can. The second point is, and you know, I don't know that if anybody listening in our audience has like a really huge following where their accounts are like monetized based on like the number of subscribers and followers. So if you're in that situation, it's a little bit different because then chances are you've got so many people following you that you're not paying attention to the individual. You know, it's kind of like a collective, which is fine. But if you're a person like me who's just on Facebook and, you know, Instagram to, you know, follow a few very like specific things, stop adding everybody who is anybody. Anybody, because there are people I know who will add anybody who sends them a friend request. And especially since like we've gotten married, men will try to add me. And I'm just like, why? Like, I don't know you. I go to their profile and I see, are they followed by anybody that I actually know? Yeah. And even like, I'll do this for like women too that try to follow me. It's like, I don't know you. You probably just want the followers. I don't want the clutter in my feeds. So I don't just follow anybody, and I don't let anybody just follow me. Yeah. Like, all of my social media is set to where you have to request. Yeah. So it's not just a click and they can do whatever they want. They can see whatever they want. Yeah. Don't do that. Do not have 25,000 followers and be following, like you said, 20,000 people in return. Yeah. Like for me, I follow like the certain like famous people that I like, and then I follow people I know. There's no like in between like, oh, there's this girl in, you know, I don't know, in Norway that's really cool that, you know, I'm gonna just randomly follow because I don't have time for that. I don't want to see that, you know. My feed is like mostly horses and makeup. That's my feed. So those were my 2 points.
I want to build on to the second point. And this pertains like specifically to like the Muslim audience. Just because, you know, some guy's wearing some thobe and, you know, some form of a turban, or some woman's got like niqab and everything and they're sharing stuff, doesn't mean that they're qualified to speak on something. That goes back to the fact that, once again, every Tom, Dick, and Harry gets to make an account. Now, some of these Tom, Dick, and Harrys...
You call yourself whatever you want. You could call yourself doctor.
Abdullahs and Aishas get to... I can share all this, you know, Islamic knowledge. You know, they pretend they're qualified. They'll dress in the garb. But it's like, you've not studied with anybody. And I don't mean like, obviously, share Quran and Hadith, that's fine. But I mean like, you're talking like you're a scholar. Yeah.
Well, they always share that one thing that's like totally out of left field and you're just like, what? And then they blow their cover, you know? Yeah. Because when you don't know something as profound as this, where spreading misinformation... Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what kind of punishment that has. Yeah. You know, in this day and age, you know, Allah didn't say anything about if thou put this on social media and it's deliberately wrong. And that's, you know, but extrapolating, it's like, no.
Well, the other thing is like I find it a little odd. Okay, especially once again, this is specifically for the Muslim audience. Okay, yeah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not have the internet. We get it. But whatever you put on there, whatever you vocalize that's recorded, okay, it's the same as if you were writing it on parchment and speaking in public. It's like, you're still, you know, you have to be careful what you say and share and what you claim to be. You know, and once again, this, you know, it's a serious problem that I think Muslims should be a lot more intelligent about. But this This also reaches into the scientific field, the medical field. Okay. You shouldn't be sharing your 2 cents about COVID-19.
From a medical perspective, yeah.
Yeah, and aspects of science when you don't have the qualifications. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Me personally, I know, especially in this day and age, there's, everybody's entitled to their opinion. There's that kind of like grand idea. And I know a number of people subscribe to that, but I think people should really start to think, should that really be like everybody's entitled to their opinion? Now, you're entitled, when you come upon evidence and that sort of thing. Okay, you can build an opinion, but once again, that opinion is that of a layperson. Mm-hmm. Whether it has to do with Islam, science, the medical field, your opinion is that of a layperson. Yeah. And we don't say that, like, I don't say that to, talk down to people. But once again, we have levels, especially as Muslims. We, race, gender, your heritage doesn't matter. What matters is your knowledge. Mm-hmm. Like in this world, obviously in the akhirah, okay, it has to do with your taqwa, how much, good deeds you did, etc. But like in this world, what matters is your knowledge. Okay, if you have the knowledge of a layperson, you have the knowledge of a layperson. I'm saying that respectfully. Mm-hmm. But if I need a medical opinion and I had to choose between a doctor and a layperson, mm-hmm. I'm picking a doctor. Yeah. If I needed this question answered about Islam, I had a scholar and a layperson. I'm picking the scholar. Anyways, I know, because this was the shortest book that we have read for this podcast. This book has, let me check, because it has some of the acknowledgments. No, it doesn't. No, it has only a page of acknowledgments. Okay, so this book had, I literally cannot find page numbers on this thing. This book had 149 pages only. This was the shortest book that we read, and we are at 50 minutes. I call that impressive. But see, when you read books like this, you have conversations like this. So read. One last suggestion, then we'll close. If you find yourself disagreeing with somebody, reach out to that person. Talk about it over coffee rather than talk about it over social media or even WhatsApp. Because I know for like a lot of people, they don't get into like discussions on Instagram and Facebook, but like WhatsApp, for example. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have a disagreement with somebody, talk about it over coffee in person. If you disagree with anything we've said here, reach out to Hamza. I kid. I like Kiney Brothers, banana chai bergs. Oh, okay. Yeah. But that's the thing. People. He who invites to the coffee shall pay for the coffee. Yeah, there you go. But it's like, if you don't have that tact, the only way you're going to build it is by having those interpersonal conversations. In-person conversations, exactly. Yeah. And so if you don't have the tact, then chances are, that same person also doesn't have the social skills. So when you do go and meet the person in person, hopefully you're going to be too scared to be tactless. And just scared enough to learn how to properly engage in person. I agree. All right, that ends this episode of Reading Between the Lines with Hamza and Mishkat. Thank you guys for tuning in, and don't forget to, share, invite people to listen to the podcast. Thank you. Thank you.